It begins the way ordinary tragedies often do, not with thunder or gunfire, but with the soft hiss of a coffee pot and the wearied sigh of a girl who has forgotten what it feels like to dream. 25-year-old Evelyn Hart wipes down the counter of a cramped roadside diner in Brooklyn called the Blue Finch, a place where the smell of fried onions and burnt espresso has seeped into the walls, the curtains, and even into the threads of her skin. She moves mechanically, as though her bones remember the motions more than her mind does, her faded uniform hugging her like a second skin. Every movement is quiet urgency, every breath a negotiation with exhaustion. Behind the counter, the clock ticks too loudly, reminding her she is late to send medicine money to her younger brother, Noah. Noah is 17, pale as winter light, lungs cracked like broken glass from cystic fibrosis. While other boys talk about prom dates and motorcycle licenses, Noah counts pills and coughs blood into tissues he hides so she will not worry. Evelyn works double shifts to afford his treatments, sometimes triple, her life narrowed to tips, hospital bills, and the silent prayer that no doctor will tell her it is too late. On this Tuesday afternoon, the diner is a chaotic symphony of sputtering grease, clattering dishes, and impatient voices. The sun spills weak gold through the grimy windows. Evelyn carries a tray stacked with cheeseburgers and steaming coffee. Her thoughts are elsewhere, on the overdue electric bill, on Noah's labored breathing when he fell asleep last night on the couch, clutching an inhaler. She does not know that fate is about to reach for her with scalding fingertips. The bell above the door chimes. Conversations die. Forks freeze mid-air. Into the worn diner walks a convoy of wealth so polished it seems unreal under the flickering fluorescent lights. They are the Blackwell family. Headlines, magazine covers, whispered legends. At the front stands Eleanor Blackwell, matriarch and chairwoman of Blackwell Holdings, a woman in her late 70s whose presence is as cold and sharp as a diamond blade. Her silver hair is sculpted into a flawless twist, her tailored coat the color of storm clouds. At her side is her elder son, Alexander Blackwell, current CEO, all angular cheekbones, tailored charcoal suit, and the expression of a man intolerant of imperfection. His wife, Olivia, follows quietly, a porcelain figure of grace and restraint, hands clutched around her designer purse. Behind them looms their security detail, stone-faced and watchful. They do not belong in this place of chipped ceramic mugs and sticky menus. Yet here they are, because their Rolls-Royce caught a flat tire 2 blocks down. The owner, Manny, nearly drops his spatula when they enter. Evelyn's pulse quickens. Manny hisses under his breath. Evelyn, table 3. Do not mess this up. She approaches with her eyes lowered. Good afternoon. What may I get you to drink? Her voice is soft but steady. Eleanor orders hot water with lemon. Alexander asks for black coffee without looking up from his phone. Olivia whispers for water. Evelyn writes their orders with trembling fingers, retreats to the counter, composes herself, and assembles the drinks with meticulous care. Then, the moment. She balances the tray, walks, breath held. As she sets the steaming cup of coffee before Alexander, a small child from the next booth stumbles, crashing into her leg. Time slows. The mug tips. A wave of hot coffee spills across the table, splashing Alexander's immaculate suit and Evelyn's forearm. She gasps, pain flaring across her skin. "You incompetent girl," Alexander snaps, rising abruptly. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs?" "I am so sorry, it was an accident," she stammers, blotting the table with napkins, cheeks burning with humiliation and fear. She imagines Manny firing her. She imagines Noah without medicine. But it is not Alexander's rage that silences the diner. It is Eleanor. The matriarch is not looking at the ruined table or her son's stained suit. She is staring at Evelyn's arm. In her panic, Evelyn has shoved up her sleeve, revealing a pale scar long hidden under fabric and insecurity. A silver crescent etched into her skin, shaped like a half-moon with a single feather curling from its arc. Something she has carried her entire life without meaning. Eleanor's hand lifts, trembling. "That mark," she whispers, voice thin as glass. "That mark belongs to my bloodline." The diner freezes in a collective gasp. Evelyn stares at her arm, then at the elder Blackwell. Her world shifts, like the floor has vanished beneath her feet. In that suspended moment of scalded coffee and whispered revelation, fate changes direction. Not toward fortune, but toward buried graves, unspoken sins, and a dynasty built on fractured truths. The bell over the diner door had scarcely finished chiming when the Blackwells departed, leaving behind the bitter smell of burnt coffee and the stunned silence of strangers who were certain they had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary or disastrous. Evelyn stood frozen, her sleeves still damp, the ghostly sting of hot coffee on her arm overshadowed by the tremor left by Eleanor Blackwell's words. That mark belongs to my bloodline. Manny, normally a man of grumbles and grease-stained aprons, said nothing. Instead, he pressed 5 crisp $100 bills into Evelyn's hand, the tip left by the silent bodyguard, and muttered, "Take the rest of the day. Just go." His voice held no anger, only disbelief and an odd respect. Evelyn walked home through the city she thought she knew, but every sidewalk and streetlight now felt foreign. She scarcely felt the weight of her shoes or the chill of the wind threading through her jacket. At her apartment, Noah sat curled on their faded couch, textbook beside him, oxygen tube in his nose. His tired but curious eyes searched her face. "You're home early. What happened?" Evelyn wanted to tell him everything, but the words felt too strange, too impossible to speak aloud. Instead, she smiled thinly and said, "Slow shift. How are you feeling?" He coughed, wiped his lips, and nodded. "Same as always." The next morning, as dawn light spilled pale over the peeling windowsill, the phone rang. Evelyn hesitated before answering. A woman's voice, elegant and clipped with a British lilt, introduced herself as Margaret Whitfield, personal assistant to Eleanor Blackwell. "Miss Hart, Mrs. Blackwell requests your presence at Blackwell Manor today at 3 o'clock. A car will be sent to collect you." It was not spoken as an invitation. It was a decree. Evelyn's breath hitched. I don't understand. Why? I'm just a waitress." There was the faintest pause on the line, like the assistant considered explaining, then decided against it. "Mrs. Blackwell will clarify. Please be ready." The line went dead. For hours, Evelyn paced their small kitchen, torn between dread and a fragile thread of hope. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke or a delusion, but a part of her remembered the intensity in Eleanor's eyes the moment she saw the scar. "That mark belongs to my bloodline." At 2:45, a black Bentley with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. Neighbors peered through curtains as a chauffeur in a tailored suit stepped out and opened the door. Evelyn kissed Noah's forehead, promising she would call. His hand lingered on hers. "Be careful, Evie." She nodded, unsure if careful was possible in a world that suddenly felt unreal. The car glided out of the city, trading cracked sidewalks for stone walls and manicured hedgerows. Evelyn pressed her forehead to the glass, watching as skyscrapers shrank and sprawling estates emerged from behind wrought iron gates. When the car turned through the towering gates of Blackwell Manor, Evelyn's breath caught. The mansion rose like something pulled from an old European painting. Ivy crept along stone walls. Fountains stood frozen mid-dance in the winter air. Windows glinted like distant stars across a facade too massive to comprehend. It was not a house, it was a kingdom. Inside, marble floors gleamed beneath her scuffed shoes. Portraits of Blackwell's long dead stared down at her from gilded frames, their faces carved with severity and pride. A butler led her through corridors that smelled faintly of pine, polished wood, and old money. No footsteps echoed but her own. She was guided into a vast drawing room with high ceilings and tall windows overlooking a glassy lake. Eleanor Blackwell sat in a high-backed chair like a queen on a silent throne. Alexander stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes cold. Olivia sat on the edge of a velvet settee, fingers knotted in her lap. Evelyn lingered near the door, feeling her heartbeat in her throat. "Mrs. Blackwell," she managed. Eleanor lifted her gaze. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Evelyn obeyed, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "I don't know why I'm here." Eleanor's eyes drifted to Evelyn's covered arm. "Because of something you carry. Something you did not choose, yet something that cannot be ignored." Alexander scoffed quietly. "Mother, we are wasting time. She is a waitress, not a Blackwell." Eleanor's voice remained calm but sharp. "The mark she bears has been worn by every woman of my maternal line for 7 generations. The crescent and feather. We call it the Blackwell Swan." Evelyn felt as though her bones turned to air. "This is ridiculous. It's just a birthmark." "Perhaps," Eleanor said softly, "perhaps not. My daughter Helena and her husband died in a storm 25 years ago. Their infant daughter was never found. If you are who I believe you might be, Evelyn, then you are not an accident. You are a Blackwell." The room seemed to tilt. Evelyn shook her head. "My parents died in a car crash. I was raised in foster homes. I have no family." Eleanor leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something between hope and grief. "Which is why we must be certain. I have arranged a DNA test. Our physician will be here shortly. If you agree, the truth will be known." "And if I refuse," Evelyn whispered. "Then you walk away," Eleanor answered, "and this becomes nothing but a strange memory." Evelyn glanced at Alexander's hostility, Olivia's silent worry, and the weight of Noah's fragile life pressed against her heart. She lifted her chin. "All right, I agree." In the quiet that followed, the future shifted, not toward certainty, but toward a storm. The clock in the drawing room ticked with agonizing precision, each second echoing against the crystal chandeliers and heavy velvet curtains. Evelyn sat rigid on the embroidered chair near the fireplace, the air thick with a silence that felt like glass, fragile, cold, ready to shatter. Eleanor Blackwell had left moments ago to prepare for the arrival of the family physician, leaving Evelyn alone with Alexander and Olivia. Alexander stood by the tall windows, staring out over the frost-glazed gardens, jaw clenched so tightly the muscle beneath his cheek twitched. His posture radiated impatience and disdain. Olivia sat quietly on a nearby chaise, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes soft with something like pity. She glanced at Evelyn once, as though wanting to speak, but said nothing. The door opened with a gentle click. Eleanor returned, followed by a man in his 60s, sharply dressed in a gray suit, carrying a leather case. His silver hair and calm presence suggested decades of quiet authority. "This is Dr. Sebastian Albridge," Eleanor said. "He has served this family for nearly 30 years. Dr. Albridge offered a small nod. "Miss Hart, this will be quick and painless. Just a swab from the inside of your cheek." Evelyn swallowed, her throat dry. She nodded. The doctor donned gloves and handed her a cotton swab. She opened her mouth obediently, heart hammering as he carefully collected the sample. Eleanor extended her arm next. The same gesture, the same swab, but something about it felt ceremonial, like a ritual binding 2 lives across time. The samples were sealed in sterile tubes, placed into a secure envelope, and signed by Eleanor, Dr. Albridge, and Evelyn. The doctor spoke quietly. "I will deliver this personally to the lab. Results will be expedited. 2 days, perhaps less." 2 days. 48 hours that could fracture or redefine Evelyn's life entirely. Eleanor dismissed the doctor and turned to Evelyn. "You will stay here until we know for certain. You will be safe." Evelyn blinked. "Stay here, at the manor." She thought of Noah alone in their apartment, of the bills, the oxygen tank humming softly beside him. "I can't," she whispered. "My brother." "Arrangements can be made," Eleanor interrupted gently. "A private nurse will be sent to care for him. His treatments, his comfort, everything will be covered. You may call him daily. But I cannot risk you disappearing before the truth is known." Alexander scoffed. "Or before you convince yourself this fantasy is real." Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "Enough." Olivia flinched, though her eyes landed apologetically on Evelyn. A maid arrived quietly, summoned by a bell Evelyn hadn't noticed Eleanor ring. "Show Miss Hart to the East guest suite. Ensure she has whatever she requires." The maid nodded. "This way, miss." Evelyn stood, feeling as though her legs did not belong to her.
She followed the maid through hallways lined with ancestral portraits, whose painted eyes seemed to follow her every step. The manor felt alive, breathing secrets through its walls, whispering warnings through the drafty corridors. The East guest suite was larger than her entire apartment. Soft cream drapes framed tall windows overlooking the lake, and a king-sized four-poster bed stood in the center. A marble bathroom gleamed with golden fixtures. In the corner sat a vanity with a silver brush set, untouched and waiting. Evelyn hesitated at the doorway. "I don't belong here." The maid, a quiet woman with kind eyes, simply replied, "None of us do at first." When the door closed behind her, Evelyn stood alone in the silence. She dialed Noah. He answered on the second ring, his voice raspy but eager. "Evie, you okay?" She swallowed back the storm in her chest. "Yes, I have to stay somewhere for a couple days, for a job. A nurse will come check on you. Is that okay?" Noah hesitated, then said, "If it's for work, I'll be fine. Just don't forget me." "Never." After the call, the weight of the day finally pressed into Evelyn's bones. She changed into the fresh clothes laid out for her, soft cotton instead of polyester. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the window. Beyond the glass, the sky darkened, and clouds gathered like a warning. Downstairs, Eleanor stood in her study, staring at an old portrait of a young woman with dark hair and the same crescent scar on her wrist. Helena Blackwell, her lost daughter. Behind Eleanor, Alexander entered without knocking. This is madness, a waitress, a nobody. Eleanor did not turn. If there is even the smallest chance that she is Helena's child, I will not turn my back. And if she isn't, then we return to our lives. But if she is, this family will have to face more than its lost heir. Alexander's jaw tightened. "You mean father's secrets?" "I mean the truth," Eleanor said softly. That night, as the manor's lights dimmed and winter rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers, Evelyn lay awake. Between the ticking of the clock and the thudding of her heart, a question lingered in the dark. What if the scar on her arm was not just a birthmark, but a key, and she had already stepped through the door it unlocked? Morning arrived wrapped in pale mist, softening the edges of Blackwell Manor like a painter's blur over a haunting dream. Evelyn woke before the sun fully rose, startled at first by the softness of the bed and the silence that pressed against her ears. It was not the silence of peace, it was the silence of expectation, as though the walls themselves waited to see what she would do next. She dressed in the clothes left neatly folded at the end of her bed, then stepped barefoot to the balcony. Below, the lake lay still and silver, untouched by wind. The gardens stretched in precise rows, sculpted hedges and ancient oaks guarding secrets older than her existence. For a brief moment, she could almost believe this was someone else's life, someone born into silk, not grease-stained aprons. A gentle knock. Olivia stood at the door holding a tray with tea and a hesitant smile. "I thought you might like breakfast in here," she whispered. "The staff can be overwhelming." Evelyn accepted with quiet gratitude. Olivia lingered, her delicate fingers brushing over the tray as if unsure whether to stay or flee. "I know this is strange. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Alexander thinks I shouldn't speak to you, but not everything is about legacy and bloodlines." Evelyn frowned. "Why are you being kind to me?" Olivia's smile was small, barely there. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped in a life you didn't choose." Before Evelyn could answer, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Alexander's voice, low and cutting, sliced through the quiet. "Olivia, leave her. You're not here to make friends with imposters." Olivia retreated with a soft apology, her eyes filled with restraint. Alexander stepped into the doorway, his presence sharp as shattered glass. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends soon. My mother may be blinded by grief, but I'm not." Evelyn met his glare with quiet strength. "I didn't ask for this. I just want the truth." He gave a cold smile. "Then be prepared. Truth here has teeth." He left, and the echo of his words lingered like smoke. Later, Evelyn wandered through the manor, drawn by curiosity and restlessness. The corridors were lined with portraits, generations of Blackwells staring down with stern eyes, their painted faces heavy with pride and judgment. Every woman bore the same birthmark on her wrist, subtle but deliberate, like a silent signature. It made Evelyn's skin prickle. It made her question everything. She paused before a portrait of a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Helena Blackwell, 1977 to 2001. Her mother. The realization cracked something open inside her. A life stolen before it began. A history she had never been allowed to know. Footsteps behind her. Eleanor stood quietly, watching her. She looked older in this light, the weight of 2.5 decades of hope and grief carved into her face. "You look like her," Eleanor said softly. "Not in the eyes, those are yours. But the way you stand, like you're already halfway gone." Evelyn swallowed. "I don't know how to be here." "No one does their first time," Eleanor replied. "This house isn't a home. It's a battleground polished with silver and marble. But it can be something different, if you are who I believe you are." Evelyn hesitated. "And if I'm not, then you leave with answers and I return to mourning. But if you are, Evelyn, this family will have to face what it buried." The day stretched on like a held breath. Staff whispered as she passed, their eyes flicking to her wrist, some curious, some cold. One maid, an older woman with silver hair tucked beneath her cap, pressed a small silver locket into Evelyn's palm without a word, then hurried away. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, a woman holding a baby, both smiling. On the woman's forearm, the faint shadow of the crescent mark. Afternoon settled like a weight. Rain began to fall, tapping softly against the tall windows. Evelyn retreated to the library, a cathedral of books and dust motes dancing in amber light. She traced her fingers along shelves of legal tomes, diaries, history volumes, every page whispering of power, alliances, betrayals. In the far corner she found a locked glass cabinet of files, each labeled with precise handwriting. Shares, inheritance, Helena Blackwell, Edward Blackwell. A chill rushed through her, her mother's name, her father's. Why were their files sealed away, like secrets, rather than memories? Behind her, a voice spoke quietly, "You shouldn't be in here." Evelyn turned. It was Stephen Ward, head of security, tall and watchful. Yet his eyes were not unkind. He lowered his voice. "Miss Hart, some doors in this house lead to answers, others to danger. Choose carefully." She nodded, heart pounding. The echo of his warning followed her from the room. Night fell across the manor, and with it came a storm. Thunder rolled like distant artillery. Rain lashed the windows. In her suite, Evelyn sat by the fire, the locket warm in her fist, the sound of the storm thrumming in her veins. Somewhere in this house, a past waited to be unearthed. And somewhere deep within her, a truth was waiting to awaken. She closed her eyes, unaware that beneath the noise of rain and wind, secrets had begun to move again. By the second night, the manor no longer felt merely vast, it felt alive. Its walls seemed to inhale, its corridors exhaled whispers, and every portrait stared at Evelyn as though waiting for her to speak a truth she didn't know yet. Rain beat against the tall windows like restless fingers, and thunder rolled beyond the horizon. But inside, every clock ticked in rigid silence. Unable to sleep, Evelyn drifted through the East Wing's hallway, barefoot, guided by curiosity and an ache she couldn't name. Her footsteps fell softly against the Persian runners, as candle sconces cast flickers of gold along the walls. She stopped before a half-open door. A faint scent of lavender and dust slipped through. Inside lay a nursery untouched by time. Tiny white curtains ruffled in the breeze. A carved wooden crib stood at the center, its bedding faded but perfectly arranged. Above it hung a mobile of silver swans, motionless, except for a slow sway from the draft. On one wall, a row of picture books sat untouched on a shelf. Evelyn stepped forward, heart pounding. A small rocking chair rested by the window. On it lay a leather-bound photo album, worn at the edges as though thumbed through by trembling hands long ago. Evelyn hesitated, then reached for it. The album opened with a quiet sigh. The first page showed a young couple, Helena Blackwell and her husband, Adrian. Helena's dark hair framed her gentle smile, and Adrian's arm was wrapped around her with a tenderness Evelyn had never known from a photograph. Beneath the image, in elegant handwriting, Helena and Adrian, 1999. She turned the page. Helena laughing in a garden. Helena holding a swan brooch. Helena with a swollen belly, glowing beneath morning sun. And then, a final photograph. Helena in a hospital bed, cradling an infant wrapped in white. The camera had captured only a sliver of the infant's arm, but it was enough. There, on the tiny forearm, was the crescent-shaped birthmark. The world blurred. The room tilted. Evelyn clutched the album to her chest and sank onto the rocking chair. She could not breathe. The truth was no longer speculation or grief-fed hope. It was ink and image and undeniable. A soft voice startled her. "That room has been locked for 24 years. Evelyn spun. In the doorway stood Mrs. Redwood, the manor's head housekeeper. Stern face. Gray hair pulled tight. Yet her eyes showed something softer, sorrow. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. I didn't mean to intrude." Mrs. Redwood stepped inside, her gaze sweeping the room not with disapproval, but reverence. This was Helena's nursery. After the yacht, no one touched it again, not even Mrs. Blackwell. She paused, then added, "You look like her when you're quiet, but you have your father's eyes." Evelyn hugged the album tighter. "Why did no one search for me? Why was I left?" Mrs. Redwood's lips pressed thin. "People did search, but the sea doesn't give back what it takes. And sometimes, secrets become easier than grief." Before Eugenia could ask more, footsteps echoed down the hall. Measured, heavy, unmistakable. Alexander. Mrs. Redwood moved swiftly, gently taking the album from Evelyn and placing it back on the chair. "Go, now, if he finds you here." Evelyn fled, heart racing, slipping into the shadows of the corridor. Just as Alexander's voice called from the opposite end, low and sharp, "Mother wants you in the drawing room. Now." She followed him in silence, pulse loud in her ears. In the drawing room, Eleanor sat near the fireplace, a teacup untouched beside her. Her expression was composed, but her hands trembled ever so slightly. On the table lay a folded letter, and a locket Evelyn instantly recognized. The same as the one she found that morning. "Sit," Eleanor said. Evelyn obeyed. Eleanor's voice was quiet. "Dr. Albridge called. The DNA results will arrive tomorrow morning. Until then, there is something you must see." She opened the letter with careful hands. It was old, written in ink, slightly faded by time. "My dearest mother, if you are reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong." This letter was signed, Helena. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. Eleanor looked at her, eyes glistening not with weakness, but with a fierce, breaking hope. "Your mother feared something before she died, and now, I fear it too." Outside, lightning tore through the night sky. Inside, the past began to bleed into the present, and the storm finally found its voice. The fire crackled softly in the drawing room, its glow casting amber light across Eleanor Blackwell's composed face, and the folded letter trembling in her fingers. Evelyn sat across from her, pulse hammering as if it might rattle the teacups on the table between them. Rain beat steadily against the tall windows, and somewhere deeper within the manor, a clock told the hour like a quiet warning. Eleanor unfolded the letter with deliberate care. Her voice, usually steady and regal, carried an undercurrent of something rarely heard from her, fear. "My dearest mother," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong." Evelyn leaned forward, breath caught in her throat. Eleanor continued, Helena's slanted handwriting reflected in every word. "Adrian thinks I am being paranoid, but the house feels colder now that father is gone. Alexander watches Adrian with disdain. But it is Richard, his ambition frightens me. He speaks not of family but of power, of legacy, of what he deserves. Adrian found plans for our departure hidden in my diary. He insists we leave quietly after the christening. I think it is our only hope. If anything happens to us, look for the truth, Mother. It will not be found in the sea." The letter ended with a single line, smeared slightly as though a tear had fallen over it. "Protect her." Evelyn's chest tightened. Her, the child. The one Helena never named in that letter, but whose birthmark whispered more loudly than any word. Alexander stood rigidly by the window, arms folded, jaw clenched. "This proves nothing," he muttered. "Old fears, old grief. You're letting ghosts dictate the future." Eleanor turned her head sharply, eyes colder than the rain outside. "This letter is not a ghost, it is a warning.
and you would do well to remember that silence can be a form of guilt. A flicker of something, anger, maybe fear, flashed across Alexander's face, but he said nothing. Eleanor placed the letter gently on the table, beside the silver locket Evelyn had brought. The locket lay open, two tiny faces inside, Helena smiling softly, and a baby wrapped in white. Evelyn's voice was quiet. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because," Eleanor said, "if you are my granddaughter, then you deserve the truth. And if you are not, then you at least deserve to understand the danger of claiming this family name." The air in the room shifted, not colder, warmer, heavier, like the breath before a confession. A knock came at the door. Stephen Ward, head of security, entered with calm formality. "Mrs. Blackwell," he said, "Dr. Albridge has confirmed. The DNA results will be delivered at 9 tomorrow morning. Hand carried. No electronic transmission as you requested." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you, Stephen. Please ensure no one disturbs us tonight." Stephen's gaze flicked briefly to Evelyn, cautious but not unkind. "Yes, ma'am." He left as silently as he came. Eleanor stood. "There is one more thing. Come with me." She led Evelyn, with Alexander reluctantly following, down a side corridor Evelyn hadn't explored. The air grew cooler as they descended a narrow staircase lit by old lanterns embedded into the stone walls. At the bottom was a small chamber, more vault than room. Steel cabinets lined the walls, every drawer neatly labeled. Legal documents, medical reports, estate records. And at the center, a single ivory box that rested atop a pedestal, locked with tarnished silver. Eleanor unlocked it with a key she wore around her neck. Inside lay a birth certificate, edges worn from handling. Evelyn's breath caught. Name, unknown female. Date of birth, August 12, 2000. Found at St. Mary's Church, Montauk. And beneath it, a photograph of a baby swaddled in white, her face barely visible, but her tiny arm exposed. The mark glinted faintly under the camera flash. Evelyn whispered, "That's me." Lightning lit the room briefly, white as bone. Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. "When the yacht went missing, I prayed you had died with them. Because the alternative was worse, that someone took you, hid you, or worse." Alexander spoke for the first time in that chamber, voice cold but tinged with unease. "And you think someone in this family?" "I think," Eleanor said slowly, "that the truth has sharp teeth." They returned to the upper floors in silence, the storm outside growing wilder, wind clawing at the windows. In her room, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, the letter and locket beside her. She wrapped her arms around herself, but no warmth came. Somewhere in the manor, footsteps passed her door, soft, pausing, listening. The truth was coming, and it was not gentle. Morning arrived not with sunlight, but with a pale shroud of fog that wrapped itself around the manor like a secret too heavy to speak aloud. Evelyn did not remember falling asleep. She only remembered lying awake in the dark, listening to the rain, the echo of Helena's letter whispering in her mind. Protect her. The words would not leave her. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Olivia stood there holding a tray of tea and toast, her eyes drawn with worry. "They're setting up in the drawing room," she murmured. "Dr. Albridge is on his way. The results, they'll be here soon." Evelyn managed a nod. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup of tea. "Thank you," she whispered. Olivia hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Whatever happens, you're not alone, not anymore." She left before Evelyn could respond. But before the results could arrive, the manor itself pulled Evelyn somewhere she did not intend to go. An hour later, on her way to the drawing room, Evelyn passed the west corridor, silent, dim, and still smelling faintly of lavender and dust. Something tugged at her, not curiosity, something deeper, a sense of being followed by memories not her own. She hesitated only a moment before turning. At the very end of the hallway, almost hidden behind a faded tapestry, she found it. A narrow door she hadn't noticed before, unlocked. She pushed it open. Beyond it was a small, forgotten study. Dust floated like tired snowflakes in the thin beams of morning light. Cobwebs clung to the corners. The desk was covered in a thin veil of dust, but beneath it were objects deliberately placed.
A journal, a silver fountain pen, a dried pressed rose. Evelyn stepped inside. The journal was leather-bound and bore initials burned into the cover. H.B. Helena Blackwell. Evelyn's breath hitched. She opened it. The entries were brief, written in elegant, slanted script. March 2nd. Adrian says we must leave after the christening. He's right. Richard is no longer just angry. He's watching us. April 17th. I saw Father's ledgers. They are not business records. They are evidence, if they ever reached the public. June 8th. I wake at night with the feeling someone is standing at the foot of the bed. July 29th. The storm is coming. I can feel it. It is not wind or rain. It is inside these walls. The final entry, August 10th. If we do not make it back, promise me someone will protect her. Promise me this family will not swallow her whole. Beneath the writing was a faint smudge, as though wiped by a tear. Evelyn closed the journal with shaking hands. Her mother's voice, real, immediate, rang louder in her mind than any letter. She turned to leave, but someone was watching. In the doorway stood Alexander. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were dark and intent. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but it held steel. Evelyn lifted her chin. "This was my mother's room." Alexander's jaw tightened. Or it was, until she vanished and you decided to play the part of her ghost. Evelyn stepped forward. "You think I'm lying, that I want money, power, what?" He didn't blink. "I think you are either the greatest con I've ever seen, or you are the beginning of the end of this family." He stepped into the room, lowering his voice. "Do you understand what will happen if the test proves you are who she thinks you are?" Evelyn swallowed. "I don't want your money. I just want the truth." "The truth," Alexander said, leaning closer, "is a blade. It cuts everyone it touches." Before Evelyn could respond, a voice echoed down the hall. "Dr. Albridge has arrived." It was Eleanor. For a moment, neither Evelyn nor Alexander moved. The journal lay silent on the desk, the ink of the last entry seeming to bleed beneath its cover. Then, with a tense breath, Alexander stepped aside. "After you." They walked together down the hallway, past the staring portraits and silent chandeliers, toward the room where everything would change. But someone else was watching, from the end of the corridor, half hidden in the shadow of a marble column. Not a servant, not a family member. A man with a worn leather satchel and observant eyes. Vincent Thorne, private investigator, and he did not come to witness the truth, he came to uncover what it would cost. The drawing room was eerily still, as if the manor itself held its breath. The fog outside remained thick, swallowing the world beyond the glass. Evelyn stood near the doorway, her palms cold, her heartbeat a steady drumbeat behind her ribs. Eleanor sat at the center of the room like a queen before a silent court, posture poised, eyes fixed on the entrance as though willing time to move faster. Alexander stood at the fireplace, arms crossed, gaze sharp as broken glass. Olivia hovered at the edge of the settee, her hands twisted anxiously in her lap. Dr. Albridge arrived with quiet certainty, his shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. In his hand he carried a large, sealed envelope bearing the insignia of one of the most trusted genetic laboratories in the country. Behind him, Evelyn noticed Stephen Ward, and further still, Vincent Thorne, the private investigator who had been silently observing, now cast a calculating glance across the room. Dr. Albridge paused before Eleanor. "Are we all ready?" Eleanor nodded once. "Proceed." The envelope was placed on the silver tray between them. The silence was so thick, it felt physical. Dr. Albridge broke the seal with careful precision, unfolded the report, and read silently for a moment. When he lifted his gaze, his voice carried the weight of finality. Mitochondrial DNA testing confirms a match between Evelyn Hart and Eleanor Blackwell. Probability of direct maternal relation exceeds 99%. Evelyn Hart is, biologically, the granddaughter of Eleanor Blackwell. Olivia gasped softly, hands flying to her mouth.
Eleanor's eyes closed, and for the first time in years, tears escaped. A quiet, trembling relief. She whispered one word. Lillian. Evelyn did not move. She didn't breathe. The name seemed to echo through her bones as if awakening some memory that had never truly existed. Lillian. The name she had never known was hers. Alexander's reaction was not relief, it was wildfire. Number. He strode forward, face flushed with fury. This is absurd.
This test can be manipulated. Money can buy any result. His voice cracked like a whip through the room. Dr. Albridge stood firm. The lab is independent. The chain of custody was flawless. There is no doubt. Alexander's gaze snapped to Evelyn. You think you can walk in here with your scar and your sob story and take everything, this fortune, this legacy, this family. Eleanor rose from her chair. Enough. Her voice, sharp and steady, cut through his rage. She stepped toward Evelyn and took her trembling hand. Evelyn, no, Lillian. Welcome home. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. She glanced at Olivia, whose tearful smile trembled with hope. But Alexander was not finished. He took one step forward. And what about the rest, Mother? If she is Lillian, then where are the bodies? Why was she found alone in a church hundreds of miles from the crash? Why was the yacht's emergency beacon severed? The words hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor slowly withdrew her hand from Evelyn's. Her face hardened. What are you implying? That someone, Alexander said quietly, dangerously, someone in this family didn't want Helena or Adrian to live. And now their daughter stands to take everything. Olivia whispered, Alexander, stop. But he did not. Instead, he turned his glare on Evelyn, on you. You think this is a fairy tale? A lost heiress reclaimed. But this house is built on blood, and you just opened a door that should have stayed closed. Vincent Thorne, still silent, watched the exchange with the calm of a man counting every crack in the foundation. Eleanor straightened. We will not discuss conspiracy without proof. Alexander's laugh was hollow. Proof? Then ask Dr. Albridge about Father's report from the night of the crash. Ask him why the beacon signal never went off. Ask him why Fiona disappeared. Eleanor went still. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. Dr. Albridge met Eleanor's eyes. The beacon wires were cut. The investigation was inconclusive. The fracture had begun. Evelyn felt it, the shift in the air, like the first tear in silk. This was no longer about who she was. It was about what had been done to keep her from ever knowing. From the corner of the room, Vincent Thorne stepped forward for the first time. If you want answers, he said quietly, I know where to start. All eyes turned to him. In that fragile moment, between truth revealed and truth demanded, the Blackwell dynasty trembled. And somewhere in the walls, the past whispered, remember. All eyes settled on Vincent Thorne, though he didn't seem rattled by the weight of the manor's attention. He stood with the composed confidence of a man who'd looked into darker secrets than most people even dared to imagine. His coat dripped from the fog outside, his leather satchel resting at his feet like an unspoken threat. The silence that followed his words was taut, dangerous, like a violin string pulled to its limit. Alexander broke it first. You have no right to be here. This is a private family matter. Eleanor did not look at him. Let him speak. Thorne inclined his head respectfully to Eleanor, then cast his gaze across the room until it settled on Evelyn. Or Lillian. Miss Hart has unknowingly stepped into a war that began long before she was born. If this is to end without blood, we need the whole truth. Eleanor's voice remained calm. Then show us. Thorne reached into his satchel and pulled out a manila folder, worn at the corners. He placed it on the table, but did not open it yet. 25 years ago, the Blackwell yacht, the Seraphine, vanished off the coast during an unexpected storm. We all know this story, but what was never made public was that the yacht's emergency beacon, a failsafe designed to activate on impact or submersion, was found intact. With its wires cut, Olivia gasped softly, her hand gripping the armrest. Evelyn felt her blood run cold. Alexander scoffed. You're peddling rumors and dramatics. Thorne held his gaze. I spoke to the Coast Guard commander who managed the recovery, off the record, of course. He remembered. Not a faulty system, not storm damage. Clean severance. With a tool. Eleanor's face remained unreadable, though her knuckles whitened around the arm of her chair.
Thorne continued. There is more. 2 days after the yacht's disappearance, a local police report was filed in Montauk. An anonymous caller claimed a baby had been left on the steps of St. Mary's Church. The baby was found wrapped in a blanket bearing the Blackwell family crest. Evelyn inhaled sharply. Her blanket. The memory was faint, but she remembered the texture of it, the faded embroidery she used to trace with her small fingers when she was alone. Alexander's eyes flashed. If this is another one of your... Thorne opened the folder. Inside lay photographs, old newspaper clippings, copies of handwritten statements. He slid a photograph across to Eleanor, a close-up of a baby's forearm. Pale skin, crescent and feather mark. Evelyn could not look away. Thorne's voice dropped. Someone took her from that yacht before or after it sank. Someone left her to be found, not drowned, not lost to the waves, placed, deliberately. The room shifted, as though the walls themselves leaned closer. Then Eleanor whispered, a sound like breaking porcelain. Helena's letter. Protect her. She knew. Alexander turned on Thorne. If you intend to accuse someone, name them. Thorne did not flinch. I don't accuse. I follow evidence. But I will say this. The only people who knew Helena and Adrian planned to leave the family were those in this house. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Alexander stepped forward, fury blazing. You dare imply... Evelyn's voice cut sharply through the room. Stop! Everyone turned. She stepped forward, her pulse pounding but her voice steady. Enough. This isn't about money. This isn't about names or legacies. My brother is sick. My life has been nothing but fear and exhaustion, and the hope that tomorrow wouldn't be worse. I didn't come here to take anything from you. I came because your mother looked at a scar on my arm and saw a ghost. So if there are truths buried in this house, I want them uncovered. Not for inheritance, for answers. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away from Alexander. Eleanor stood slowly. Vincent, what will you need? Thorne's answer was immediate. Access to all family records from the year of the accident, financial statements, travel logs, letters, and the full cooperation of anyone who was present at the manor during the months leading up to the wreck. Alexander laughed bitterly. You'll find nothing but grief and imagination. Eleanor turned to him, eyes sharp as carved steel. Then you have nothing to fear, or do you? Thunder cracked outside like the sky was splitting. Evelyn glanced at the portraits on the walls, the faces of Blackwell's long-dead watching, silent judges of the living. And for the first time since she entered Blackwell Manor, she knew this story was no longer about whether she belonged. It was about whether the truth, once unearthed, would destroy everything. In the distance, a phone rang. Stephen Ward entered quietly. Mrs. Blackwell, it's for you. From the archives in Montauk, they found something. The storm had only just begun. Eleanor took the call in silence, her back straight, her voice composed but brittle around the edges. Yes, thank you. Have the documents delivered immediately. She ended the call, placing the phone back onto its cradle with a soft click. The sound seemed to reverberate through the room like a signal. Something had shifted again. They found the church's original intake record, she said finally. The one from the night the baby was left at St. Mary's in Montauk. There are additional documents. They're sending everything here by this afternoon. Alexander's expression hardened. This is out of control. We are dredging up tragedies that should remain buried. Eleanor's gaze was cold iron. Tragedies do not stay buried, Alexander. Not forever. They rise, just as she did. Evelyn felt every eye on her. Her pulse roared like the storm outside. She wasn't ready. But the truth did not wait for her readiness. Vincent Thorne stepped forward, adjusting the worn strap of his satchel. While we wait for those records, there is another place we should examine. The Blackwell archives, the private one, kept by your father, Mrs. Blackwell. Eleanor's jaw tightened. That archive is sealed, locked by his final will. You know this. Yes, Thorne said, but your father never destroyed anything. And he was a man who documented every transaction, every dispute, every betrayal.
His ledgers, shipping logs, personal correspondence. If there are answers, if there is motive or manipulation, those records might hold them. Eleanor hesitated only a moment. "Stephen, unlock the study." Stephen Ward gave a curt nod and left the room. Evelyn followed them through the manor's oldest corridor, past heavy drapes and flickering sconces. She didn't know where courage ended and fear began. All she knew was she had to see this through, even if the truth split her world in two. The study was unlike the rest of the manor. No polished marble or gilded frames. It smelled of dust, leather, and ink. Tall shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with black volumes bound with crimson thread. A massive desk sat at the center, carved with the Blackwell crest, the crescent and feather she now wore on her skin. Stephen unlocked a small iron door built into the wall. Inside, rows of locked drawers. Eleanor approached one marked 2000 to 2001. Her hand trembled only slightly as she opened it. Inside lay documents in flawless order. Ledger entries, receipts, letters sealed in wax. Vincent stepped forward, pulling on gloves, and began to examine them with practiced care. The first ledger detailed the weekly expenditure of the family's maritime division. Evelyn read over his shoulder. Emergency maintenance request, Seraphine Yacht. Starboard wiring and signal array. Approved by A. Blackwell. "Who is A. Blackwell?" she whispered. Alexander spoke before he could stop himself. "Adrian, my father." Evelyn frowned. "But he died on that yacht." Vincent did not glance up. Repairs requested 7 days before the crash. Work order signed again 2 days before. But the beacon wires were cut, not repaired. Eleanor closed her eyes. Another document, a letter from Adrian to Eleanor. "Mother, I know you and Father disagree with my decision to leave with Helena, but I cannot raise my child in a house shadowed by silence and legacy. I will not let her drown in expectations or fear. My shares will be placed in trust for her. This is the only way." Unsigned, a draft never sent or intercepted. Alexander stepped back, hands clenched into fists. "This proves nothing. It was his choice to leave." Vincent's voice was quiet but sharp. Leaving meant withdrawing his shares, 20%. Enough to destabilize, enough to break control. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. Someone wanted them gone, but not drowned at sea, removed before they could leave. Thunder rumbled, closer now. Rain hammered against the study windows. Then Stephen entered again. "A courier is here, from Montauk." They all followed him to the entrance hall. A uniformed officer handed Eleanor a sealed envelope. Her hands were steady when she took it. Inside, a yellowed intake record from St. Mary's Church. A baby girl, no name, swaddled in a wool blanket embroidered with a silver swan. Found 1:12 a.m. Outside, a stolen car abandoned nearby. Driver's seat covered in sand and sea salt. Beneath it, another record. Witness statement from a fisherman. He claimed he saw a woman at the shore carrying a baby, cloak soaked in seawater, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Protect her." Evelyn's vision blurred. She clutched the edge of the wooden table. Vincent read the final line aloud. Woman was not identified. She vanished before the police arrived. Eleanor's lips parted in a whisper. Fiona. The name fell like a stone into still water. The manor seemed to exhale. Olivia murmured, "Who's Fiona?" Eleanor's eyes glistened. Helena's governess, her closest confidant. She loved the child like her own. Thunder cracked again, but none of them flinched. Evelyn whispered, "If Fiona took me from the wreckage, then who cut the wires? Who wanted us gone?" The silence that followed was sharper than any scream. Because now, there was no denying it. Someone in Blackwell Manor was not mourning the past. They were hiding it. Rain whispered against the glass as the study doors opened once more. The air inside Blackwell Manor felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Eleanor stood motionless near the hearth, hands clasped tightly, while Evelyn hovered near the window, heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread.
Vincent Thorne checked his watch. She will be here any minute. Fiona did not refuse. Olivia stepped into the room quietly, uncertainty in her eyes. Alexander remained at the minibar, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass he did not drink. Stephen stood near the entrance, his posture rigid, prepared for impact. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft, unhurried. A life spent hiding, now walking back into the center of the storm. The doors creaked open. A woman in her late 50s entered, slight, weathered, her hair streaked with gray and tied neatly at her nape. A faded wool coat clung to her shoulders, rainwater glistening on the fabric. Her eyes, sharp, haunted, unflinchingly clear, met Eleanor's first. "Fiona." She removed her wet gloves and placed them on the side table. Her voice was quiet. "Mrs. Blackwell, it has been a long time." Eleanor inhaled slowly, as though afraid the moment might vanish if she moved too quickly. "Thank you for coming. You should not have. It isn't safe." Fiona's gaze drifted to Evelyn, but she had to know. Richard was summoned. He appeared moments later, the storm still clinging to his coat. His eyes landed on Fiona. For a brief, chilling instant, the mask slipped. Shock, fear, then anger. "You," he breathed, "you should have stayed buried with the lies you told." Fiona's lips pressed into a thin line. "I did not come to fight. I came because truth must belong to the living, not the dead." She stepped farther into the room, looking at Evelyn fully. "You were never meant to stay here. Not in this family. Not with what they would make of you. I did what I could to save you." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You knew my parents." Fiona nodded. "I held you the day you were born. I swore to your mother I would keep you safe, even if it meant she would never see you grow." Alexander scoffed quietly from the corner. A convenient story, no proof. Fiona turned toward him with calm disdain. "I wish it were only a story." She reached into her coat, pulling out a leather bundle tied with faded ribbon. Inside were letters, photographs, and a small silver locket. Evelyn felt her pulse thunder as Fiona opened it. On one side, a photograph of Helena Blackwell holding a swaddled infant. On the other, Adrian's smiling face. Eleanor reached forward, hands trembling. "I remember that locket. Helena never took it off." Fiona laid the letters on the desk, her gaze never leaving Eleanor's. "These are Helena's final writings. The ones she entrusted to me, just in case." Vincent unfolded the top letter, scanning it quickly. Written in Helena's unmistakable script. He read aloud. "If something happens to us, it will not be an accident. Adrian believes someone wants to stop us from leaving. If our child survives, protect her. Do not let this house claim her spirit." Silence crashed down like a wave. Richard's face twisted. Lies. All of it. This woman was paid to fabricate fantasies. Fiona's voice cut clean through his rage. "You were there that night, by the yacht, with a tool bag. You argued with your brother. You said if he left, he would burn the Blackwell legacy to the ground. He told you legacy was not worth a child's life. You walked away. You let the storm do your work." Richard lunged forward, fury scalding his features, but Stephen blocked him with a firm arm. Eleanor stepped toward Fiona, disbelief and agony warring in her eyes. "Why did you not come back? Why disappear?" Fiona's voice trembled. "Because Adrian begged me to run. Because your son threatened me. Because this house does not forgive those who speak." Evelyn felt everything shift inside her. The room, the truth, her own pulse. She looked at Richard. He stared back, cold, cornered, poisonous. Eleanor straightened, shoulders lifting as though she carried centuries of duty in her spine. "Enough." Her voice was calm thunder. "Bring the board members, bring the attorneys. It ends tonight." Richard's eyes burned as he spoke, low and vicious. "Do you think anyone will believe this? You will destroy this family, Mother." Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. "No, Richard, you did that the night you chose power over blood." Fiona turned toward Evelyn. "And you, child, must choose as well. This truth can free you, or consume you." The storm outside roared like an answer, and inside Blackwell Manor, the ruins of silence began to crack. Lightning split the sky as the boardroom doors closed for the final time that night. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, but the air was choked with tension rather than elegance. Eleanor Blackwell sat at the head of the table, her posture straight as stone.
To her right sat Evelyn, no longer just a quiet girl from an anonymous life, but a name written into the bloodline of one of America's most powerful families. To her left stood Vincent Thorne, watchful and silent. Across from them, Alexander and Olivia sat, hands folded nervously. And, standing at the far end, his fists clenched at his sides, was Richard. "You have no idea what you are doing," Richard said, voice cold, almost eerily calm. "You are tearing down a dynasty for a ghost story and forged letters. You will regret this." Eleanor did not blink. "The documents have been verified by legal counsel. Fiona has spoken. Vincent confirmed sabotage on the Seraphine. And now the board has voted. You are removed from the position of CEO effective immediately." Richard let out a bitter laugh. "And who will replace me? Her?" He nodded toward Evelyn with barely contained contempt. "A waitress. A charity case." "No," Eleanor replied softly. "Me. I will lead until Evelyn is ready, until she chooses her own path. Our legacy will not be defined by your silence or ambition any longer." Richard's composure fractured, his voice rising. "Everything I have done, everything, was to protect this family, to protect what Father built. Father built an empire on fear," Eleanor answered, "but I will rebuild it on truth." Two security officers approached. Richard looked to Alexander, to Olivia, searching for support. None came. His eyes, once sharp with power, softened with something dangerously close to grief. "You are making a mistake, Mother." "Perhaps," Eleanor replied, "but it is mine to make." Richard stepped back slowly, his shoulders square despite the ruin around him. As he walked toward the door, he paused, looking at Evelyn with a gaze colder than winter. "This is not over." It was not a threat, it was a promise. He left. The thunder outside echoed his exit. The board members stood one by one and departed in silence. Soon, only Evelyn, Eleanor, Vincent, Alexander, Olivia, and Fiona remained. "What now?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Now," Eleanor said, "we begin again." The following weeks unfolded like pages turning in a book no one had wanted to open. Richard was exiled to the family's remote estate in Patagonia, under quiet surveillance. No court trials, no headlines. Eleanor chose silence not out of mercy but to shield Evelyn and the rest of the family from public spectacle. The Seraphine yacht case was officially closed due to lack of prosecutable evidence. But within the walls of Blackwell Manor, the truth was no longer denied. A new foundation was established in honor of Adrian and Helena Blackwell, dedicated to funding medical treatment and art education, two things they had loved most. The first grant issued paid for Daniel Parker's full treatment. Watching her brother breathe freely without pain for the first time in years made Evelyn's chest ache with something deeper than happiness. It was peace. Evelyn did not move into the master suite. She chose a smaller room overlooking the garden, where the morning light filtered through ivy. She still made tea for herself, still woke early, still called Daniel every night. Fiona remained at the manor in a quiet cottage near the lake. Sometimes Evelyn would visit her. They would sit in silence, not out of discomfort, but understanding. Alexander and Olivia, once distant, grew closer, not to power, but to truth. They no longer saw Evelyn as an intruder, but as a mirror, showing them what real courage looked like. And Eleanor, no longer just the matriarch, became something more fragile and more powerful. A woman who chose her daughter over her pride. She would walk with Evelyn through the rose garden each morning, speaking softly of Helena, of Adrian, of choices made and consequences carried. One evening, as twilight bled across the sky, Evelyn stood at the lake's edge. The water was still, dark, reflecting the crescent moon and a single feathered cloud drifting past. She traced the birthmark on her arm, the Blackwell crest. Once a mystery, then a curse, now a compass. Vincent approached quietly. "You know he will try something," he said. "Richard is not a man who accepts defeat." "I know," Evelyn replied, "but I am not the girl who spilled coffee in a diner anymore." He nodded once, approving. "What will you do now?"
Evelyn looked back at the manor, its windows glowing warmly in the dusk. I will tell the truth, not just about myself, about all of it. And then, I will decide if this legacy is worth keeping, or if it needs to be rewritten. And for the first time since stepping into that diner with a tray of coffee and a hidden scar, she felt it. Not fear, not doubt, purpose. The storm had passed, but the future was hers to shape, and this time, the truth would not be buried.